Hi guys, and welcome to this week's EPiDev talk show here in Google Hangouts. My name is Allan Thraen. I'm a technical fellow with EPiServer, and today I'm joined here by two of our EMVPs. It's Marija Jemuovic and Dr. Everard that are here. Today we're going to talk about a really interesting topic that I really enjoy. It's about how can you, as a developer, code for the editor persona. Thinking about the fact that typically when you build a website on EPiServer or any other platform for that matter, you often are faced with the fact that you build a really great website for the visitor. But in order to have a successful website on the long-term scale, what you want to do is also, of course, to consider the editor persona, the content creator, the people that are going to create the great content on your website, give them a good working environment so they're comfortable to use all the cool facilities on your site. With that said, Marija, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about who you are and your experiences with editors.
Yeah, my name is Marija. I work for Mogul. It's a Swedish-based company, but I'm sitting here in Serbia with much better weather all the time. And I have been working with EPiServer for quite some time now. I'm an MVP since January 2014. And I have worked with EPiServer 6, 5, and then with a huge change to 7, which gave us a lot of more opportunities and lots of things to play around and to actually more choices to build functionality for our editors as well. And my experience is that there are different kinds of levels that editors actually, of technology level, that editors have. Some are more geeky, which is great, but many of them are also a little bit used to the old style and the old school, and they're not very comfortable with things that are flying around and stuff like that. So basically, what we are striving to do is actually to adjust our development not only for the viewers but also for the editors, since eventually they will be building something for the viewers as well.
Absolutely, and I think actually it's a really good point you have about the different kinds of editors there. I mean, there is both the editors that want to insert their own HTML, and then we have the occasional editors that just want to copy and paste a Word document every once in a while. So important thing to remember. Mark, how about you? Could you give a little introduction to yourself?
Sure. So I'm Mark. I'm an EMVP, and I work as a technical architect at Marija Jemuovic. So before that, I worked at Possible, where we were an agency who implemented a lot of sites. I've been working with EPiServer since about 2008, so quite a while, across version 5, 6, and 7, like Marija. Now it's quite interesting, so I've jumped to client side, so I now get to see how important it is to have a CMS that works for your editorial team. So I think previously I'd seen when I joined Marija Jemuovic, we were using EPiServer 6, and I could see that the content team, I don't know, they struggled with really basic tasks. The CMS perhaps wasn't implemented in the best way. You know, some of the small little quick wins that could have been there to help editors out weren't there. I'm sure we'll discuss those points a little bit later. Whereas now we moved on to a new platform, and I think one of the things that I'm most proud of is actually that content team now get on and manage content, right? And they don't need any support from the development team or anybody else. They just do it. And now they're beginning to sort of experiment with some of the more advanced features on the platform. So they came to ask me about questions about personalization the other day, which is brilliant as far as I was concerned.
Yeah, for us it has been quite interesting. We got requests like rebuilding the whole website, even though it's completely fresh, that was built on another platform, just because the editors didn't like the editorial experience. And while EPiServer gives lots of opportunities now, and it's fancy, modern, and really easy for the editors to use, a lot of impact on how it will eventually be used is actually coming from the developer. The designers are going to think about their personas, strategical groups that are going to visit the website, but actually the part where you decide what kind of content area will you use. Will you use blocks or maybe pages, or build a custom Dojo plugin, or go with something else? that's something that actually a developer needs to decide, and in that way, developer needs to put him or herself in editor's shoes to get like, okay, is this quite good for my editor? And for Mark, it's also, he has direct access to the editors. So, but for us as a consultant company, most of the time editors are seeking for advice. They don't know, even if we would show them like, would you like it to work this way or another way? They probably wouldn't know unless they have been using a bad or system that doesn't work for them for a while.
That's a good point. I mean, I've in my time here with EPiServer been out talking to many editors and meeting them, and also looking over their shoulders as they use the system. And I'm surprised to see how difficult it sometimes is for them to work because they don't know the right path to follow, or it wasn't planned from the beginning how the content structure should be set up, which properties should be where, or just basic stuff that they don't know about the system, how it works, or that doesn't match up with their internal system. So they have many dependencies they have to care about. I guess it's to a certain degree both a training issue, but also a matter of how can you help them in the system technically in the implementation.
Yeah, I agree with that, Alan. It's something definitely come across. I think while we were re-platforming onto EPiServer 7, I think as a developer it's really easy to take for granted a lot of those features, but you never really think about actually how they're used. And you mentioned the content structure. From a development point of view, okay, you understand it's in EPiServer it's a hierarchical structure pretty much. I guess a little bit different now. We've got blocks and feature items, but pretty much your content in a hierarchical structure. It seems easy, you can work with it, but for some editors that's actually quite a big step for them, and they might not know how best to structure their content. I mean, ultimately you've got to remember that EPiServer CMS is a content management system. It's there to help your editors manage their content as much as it's there to help deliver a website.
Absolutely. So what do you guys think that developers can do to improve the system for the editors as they're building the implementations? Can you give some examples? Or
yeah, basically what we have been discussing about is that there are quite some things that are coming out of the box and that they need to just be used in a proper way without a lot of overthinking, let's say. And one of them is when the blocks arrived and content areas, then I think all of us had this idea, like really thinking in a developer way. Let's use this feature. Let's have a block, a content area, and then a couple of blocks, and inside the block another content area which has blocks. And as far as I can see, everybody who is new, at least on forum, asks questions like, is it possible to have a content area in a content area in a block? And I don't know if Mark, if you also went down that path in the past.
Yes, I did. So yeah, I fell into that trap of thinking, wouldn't it be cool? Wouldn't it be cool if you had a content area and a content area? Asking myself, it made a load of sense from looking at the markup that you had to put out on the page. Of course, it makes sense perfectly, but now standing over the shoulders of the editors, just like Alan was saying, it doesn't really make any sense, and that experience isn't right. And I think, yeah, looking at those kind of solutions now, I'd probably move away from having, I think you put it quite nicely earlier, Marija, inception of content areas. Content areas and content areas and content areas is a difficult thing to for an editor to get their head around. So I don't think I'd ever do that again. I think I'd look at it slightly differently.
Yeah.
Well, not just to get the head around, I guess, but also just to I mean, it's more clicks basically, and it's more editing views you have to go into when you have to first find one content area, open a block, then move to the next block within a content area there. I mean, you get many levels deep, and the human brain can generally work well with about 2 levels in any hierarchy, and then it gets messy. So obviously there is a big challenge.
I think a lot of that, I'd look again, moving back to that content structure. So when you're looking at your blocks, developers, I think we would generally look at it in terms of what's reusable functionality or what's reusable markup. Whereas I think there's that other question, which is what would be reusable content. So what things does it actually make sense to only have one version of in your content management system? Is it a quote, you only want one version of a quote, or is it a person object, or a person bit of content? Whereas there are sometimes I think you need to think like that, which might move you down that path of saying, okay, we need that reusable content area. But then there are other times where probably you're just going down a little bit of technical folly and just following along and doing that inception route because it's too cool. So I think there's always those questions around content.
There definitely is, and I think it's also, it's also a matter of, this is stuff that's still fairly new in the EPiServer world. Blocks, for instance, and the way we work with page types is basically from version 7. And I guess to a certain degree we still kind of need the content design patterns and how would you want to structure the content. Some people have a really good angle to it, some people get a more desperate angle to it. It really depends also what you want to do, because I see sites that are all the way from one page type to use for all pages with one big content area in the middle and everything else is blocks, to much more granular 200 page types. It's really a good question. What do you put where? What do you put in content areas? What do you put in blocks? What do you put in pages? My rule of thumb is I generally like to think of the page types as the business entities, and the pages is stuff you want to have URL addressable. But that's my simple techie approach to it, and it doesn't work great in all cases.
Yeah, I think...
Oh, sorry, Mark. Shoot.
Ladies first, Maria.
Yeah, it's also consideration related to SEO. Basically, if you need to have something that is a landing page, then it shouldn't be a block content. And of course, the designers go into different thinking about how flexible it is for the editor to build a page. And most of the time, this flexibility is not really truly needed. Sometimes it's, of course, with advanced systems, you do need a lot of flexibility in terms of how will something look like and what can be moved where and stuff like that. But sometimes just a simple local block to the page with some fixed number of properties, even though they won't be always filled in, is better choice than having everything completely dynamic and flexible. That's at least our experience so far.
I very much agree with that. I think too much power can be a bad thing, because it also leaves too many options and too much work to do when you want to create a press release, for instance, or a new campaign page. I mean, for landing pages, places where you want to promote many different teaser blocks, that kind of thing, sure, it's great to have the flexibility of a content area and blocks that you can place, but that should be the super editors, those with the rights to that part of the site. In many cases, what you really want to do is to limit it down so people can create a press release with the basic fields they want to fill in, and options, so that the options are limited. If there are any kind of special fields that needs to be filled in, help them out with autocomplete, with drop-down lists, and so on. But we can get back to that, of course. While I remember, just a quick host comment here. If any of you guys viewing the show want to tap into the conversation or come with a question, feel free to fire off a tweet using the EPiDev hashtag. We'll be following the feed and taking questions along the way. You guys, go ahead.
Say one thing you mentioned earlier, Alan, I don't think we really answered, is what the really simple things that you can do as a developer. And I think the basics, which we kind of forget about. So the attributes you mark up your content types with, making sure they have a sensible name, i.e. not a developer name, and a sensible description, so people know how to use them. Really, really basic things, but too often I've seen implementations where you kind of forget, and you'll get something called an X-form block. X1 blocks mean something to us as developers. It doesn't really mean anything to an editor. Calling it a form block is probably more sensible. The other things, locking down the allowed types, I think is really important, and again, it's really easy to do now in EPiServer 7. You have an attribute markup on your content types that allow you to say where it should be created. What are the allowed types, and again, that can make a huge difference to the editors, because they don't have that overwhelming choice of options. I think one more thing, just a shameless plug for the stuff that I did, is content icons. I think one of the nice things around EPiServer 7 is that they brought a much more graphical feel to that user interface. It felt a bit nicer to use, and editors will have to sit in that interface all day. But that means you also, for any of your kind of content types, you need to have an image to really make that interface shine. So I blogged and open sourced a while ago a set of content icons we designed for our system at Marija Jemuovic, which is a start, right? But I think there needs to be a little bit of thought around what those icons should be, because again, that visual aid to an editor can really, really help them.
I completely agree, and I actually really enjoyed that blog post. And it's the small things. I mean, an icon can mean the difference for an editor if they can easily, with one click, find what they need or not. Marija, do you have any other good examples of common editor mistakes or places where editors can easily jump in and improve?
I would say that there are quite some development mistakes that are related to edit on page functionality that also came with EPiServer 7. And most of the time, it's quite when you know how to do it, it's quite easy to actually create an editor descriptor for something that requires, I don't know, a wrapping class or additional markup, not only what is rendered by default. And I see a lot of either checks in code like if page editing dot is page in edit mode, or then it goes down that path, like if string is not null or empty, and then else, and then if it's not null or empty but it's in edit mode. So actually something that is really easily solvable with a couple of lines of code and one display template, that's something that is when we also first started with it, we thought, okay, that's the approach. But actually, I can share my screen and show a little bit of a. Let me know when you see it.
Yeah, we do now. Okay. We do now.
Basically, this is a standard Alloytech templates, Alloytech demo site for EPiServer, and basically I couldn't spot a lot of things I would change there. They were quite good at making this work from the editor's perspective very well, as it looks like. And for example, some of these things, there are only a few that I noticed. One of them is this meta description, and one approach to having rendering properties is actually to use display templates. And this kind of approach with actually using directly the meta description on the page doesn't call the display template. So display template would be called if this is instead at html.property4. And ideally, it would be the best if the whole page would only be like HTML property 4, HTML property 4, or HTML display 4 were necessary. And here, if there is a need to actually, if this property, which is actually on a site page data, it's reused on many pages, and every time it's reused, this class introduction is rendered, and the whole thingy. Instead, it would be quite easier if this meta description was decorated with a UI hint. With just whatever the name is. Of course, it would be better to put it in a proper file, and then using the text area only for editing. And here comes the presentation layer that is quite convenient here. So basically, the text area is only used for editing, whereas the display is used only for displaying the actual meta description. And then in order for this to work, there is only one more thing to be done, and that's to create the display template with the same name. That's the important part. And then I'll just copy paste it from, it's quite easy to do that. Oh, sorry. And then additionally, you could do things like this, maybe to line break the string or clean it up from some unwanted characters. Let me just see if I have that already. I do. So basically now for this page that I changed, just a moment.
I think while you're coding, I think to me is really, I guess, a really basic thing around developing for MVC rather than necessarily EPiServer here. You know, you should always try and keep your views light of any markup, or not markup, sorry, not light of markup, the opposite, light of any code, because it's not you don't get the benefits of compile time checking them. So whenever you see kind of old spaghetti code, it reminds me of classic ASP templates, and we kind of want to move away from that. So these sort of approaches of kind of separating out into different views or different HTML helpers or that sort of breaking it down, I think really helps simplify a lot of this.
Exactly. It's an easy trap to fall into to want to just start doing if sentences when you're building your display templates, but really should be avoided.
Yeah, let me just show the end result. Here it is. So basically, now when I click on this page description, the edit mode will use another UI hint. So for the presentation layer edit, this is going to pop up because of the UI hint text area. But then when I type, then my line break is visible. Just for the purpose of view, and then I don't need to repeat all the code and or have ifs and buts in the code as well. So basically, yeah, that's it for me.
That's really great. Marija, could you also just jump back to the code again, because there's another good point to make here. If you look at the page type declaration.
Yeah, let me just share.
Which is a question I've gotten many times here, which is a comment, from developers like, well, I want to help the editor, I want to optimize their experience, but does that mean I have to start coding a lot of Dojo because I don't know Dojo? And trust me, I mean, Dojo is a great platform to build a user experience like EPiServer's user experience on, but you don't really need to learn it, and in my experience, it takes about 3 years at Hogwarts to really get your nails dirty there and learn it very well. But there are many other ways you can do it. Mark, you were saying to me earlier that if somebody starts coding Dojo, then that's probably a sign they're doing something wrong.
Well, yeah, I think Dojo and custom properties in the kind of older EPiServer way, usually that's, I think, where you're trying to do something too complicated. And I think there's a lot of power in those simple kind of integration points in the user interface, such as selection factories, such as the ability to lock down different content areas, such as, I don't know, I think selection factory is probably a really good point. The validation attributes as well. There's some really powerful stuff that you can do without extending and building lots of, big pieces of code, be it Dojo or those elements. So, yeah, I think there's always often easier, because it means an editor also has to learn less. They just follow the standard framework. It's out-of-the-box functionality.
Yeah, many things are quite easy to build with built-in functionality, with editor descriptors plus selection factories that allow you to actually preload the values for the customer instead of having just a string or something that is a free text that an editor is completely stunned when if they had no education when they see it.
Exactly.
But one more thing. Yeah, one more thing.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, one more thing that I noticed is that again this developer thinking gets in a way is that we are a little bit spoiling the editors by putting, for example, everything with edit on page support, such as meta properties and SEO things that are not supposed to be visible on the view. And again, it's extra effort, it's additional time for the client, and the client still, at least from my perspective, would need to go into all properties view from time to time and check what's in there, if there are some advanced settings that maybe an administrator would set, or somebody with higher permissions.
Absolutely. Marija, could you try to look at the model for the stuff you're looking at here?
This one, or are
just any model, really. Okay. You are one of the like page types.
Yeah.
The models.
Oh, that's not going to be a very interesting.
There we go. That's. But my point is really that I think one of the keys is really just to consider the attribute you put on all your property declarations when you build up your content structure. I mean, really give good thought into your content structure, and then also give really good thought into your attributes, because those are the ones that you would use to add selection factories and drop-down lists and UI hints, as we saw before. Just basic validation really can help editors quite a bit when they move along. And of course, good description, text, and so on. I mean, a lot of the tricks to succeeding with editors, I believe, really lies in just adding the right attributes and having the right content structure, of course. We have a question come in here. How do speakers feel in relation to creating complex editor, heavy dojo scripting, and similar? For example, having a flexible grid property. Well, I guess we already kind of touched a bit on that.
Yeah, I can think back to many times where you've had requirements come, or had requirements come from customers where they basically just wanted to change the EPiServer interface, right? And it's because they maybe didn't like it. And I think there's always that balance to be had between what's the benefit from delivering something complex, like some dojo widget within the interface, compared to the cost of maintaining that. Once you start moving into that sort of area, you can spend a lot of development time actually not really doing too much. So I always try and I guess challenge the clients on those requirements before setting off down that path of just going away and building something because that's what somebody thinks they want.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I see another question here. Oh, Marija, do you have any point here?
No, just that the maintenance later is something to also take into account with upgrades and everything. And if there is at least if there is a simpler approach to it, then it's probably worth discussing with your editor and explaining that it can be done in a more future-proof way, I would say.
Absolutely. Another good question here is, what do you see as the different that you should do different for momentary editors? I call them occasional editors. I think it's the same concept. Editors that only work with the content maybe once a month.
I think this is working out what content types they might be using. So normally, or from my experience, what I've found is that those sort of editors are ones that have a very specific task in your CMS that might be, I'm going to add a news article or a press release. And I think there you have to look at the design of your content structure and say, having a very flexible page type that allows you to drag in lots of blocks, that's a more advanced bit of functionality, whereas actually if they're just these more momentary editors that don't live in the CMS day in, day out, a more simple page type with all of your properties on page is actually going to help them more than the reuse you might get from having lots of shared blocks.
There are also really good help texts and explanations for every property, help a lot. We get requests from clients like, can you please put stuff in brackets? Now I think Alf from Net Relations built also a plugin for all properties view that displays a nicer help text for the editors. That helps a lot, I think. And also it's now possible to restrict editors from actually even viewing a part of the tree in edit mode. That might also be helpful, so that they only see their stuff and don't think about the rest of it.
I agree. I would also say from an EPiServer perspective, we are coming out with a few new things fairly soon. One of them is one of the things coming into the Converge platform from the Actron side is the ability to have, we call it instant templates right now, a way where you can make content types that are templated with some default values set already. So you can have instances of stuff where there's already pre-populated with different blocks in the different content areas and so on, so that those occasional editors can basically just hit a button and fill in just the fields they need to, and create new from a template instead of creating new from a type. So that's one approach. We get another question about the display templates approach you were showing before, Marija. Mm-hmm. Is that logged, documented somewhere?
I'm not sure if there is just one documented approach. There are quite a lot of posts. I would suggest everyone to read Joel Abrahamsson's post on the topic. He has quite some examples related to that, and also related to how content areas are rendered with specific tags. And I think without that, it's quite a good basis to start with. And I don't know if there is only one blog post with that.
Okay. I can see that we've reached our time slot more or less here. Do you guys have any final comments or closing words?
Yeah, basically our goal was to maybe encourage you to think a bit more about the editor when deciding on how functionality is built. And I hope we succeeded in that. And yeah, get back with more questions, and Peter will try to answer.
Well, definitely gave it a try, huh? Great. Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you so much for your time. And for everybody else, within the next week or the week after, I'm sure there'll be another EPiDev. So watch the Twitter hashtag EPiDev for more upcoming sessions. Bye-bye and